Hi, everyone. Yeah, what we've got planned for today is I'm going to go through kind of an overview session with some informational slides for you, and then we'll get you guys all set up with your individual instances, and we've got a lab that we can all follow along together and work on actually performing some scans. So for the presentation portion, I'm your instructor, Carl Beckelheimer. I've been working with AppScan for a number of years, previously at IBM, and then I came over with the rest of the team to HCL when AppScan was acquired. And yeah, what we're going to cover today, basically an introduction to AppScan with an overview of the solution itself. We're going to talk about static source scanning and open source, also known as software composition analysis. And then we've got some labs we're going to run through. And once we conclude that, we can get through to the license model and talk about how you can set up a trial for yourself. So I mentioned, AppScan has kind of taken a journey over the years. Initially developed at various points. The AppScan portfolio actually consists of a few different technologies. So the history goes all the way back to 1998. Where it was initially developed, acquired by Watchfire, and then in 2007 acquired by IBM. HCL and IBM formed a partnership in March of 2017, where HCL started taking on some of the development and support duties for AppScan. And after some successful work there, HCL actually acquired the product, and that's where we are today. AppScan has experienced a number of improvements under HCL. One of the reasons for that IBM partnership was just to have additional resources available to increase research into AppScan and develop the product itself. And that was very successful under both companies, and we've continued that today solely under HCL. Third parties have also confirmed AppScan's strong place in the market. We're shown as a leader both in the IDC MarketScape as well as the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And for the second year in a row, we've been placed in the leaders sector for Gartner's Magic Quadrant. It's somewhere that we've maintained strong, even over the years. So this is our second year in the row that we were in the leaders quadrant now. We were also there in the past. I think our first year over at HCL, we moved to the left there just from some of the uncertainty of the sale, but we've been back in the leaders quadrant and staying strong there with our recent developments with AppScan. And modern AppScan usage, we try to focus on three themes. One is secure DevOps, being able to tie into a secure DevOps environment and really tie into the processes of an organization so that scanning your applications makes sense in a modern development environment. Focus on the fix. And so this has to do just with scan accuracy and performance. And so we do make use of machine learning and other technologies, different ways to optimize scans in order to try to maintain and improve on that high accuracy and efficiency. And then enterprise management. So we're built to be able to scale to very large organizations, and while still being accessible by smaller teams and smaller orgs, we do need to also be able to handle the very large organizations, so that those scaling capabilities are a part of our general idea of developing AppScan and one of the important pieces that we focus on. As far as tying into a DevOps environment, AppScan is made to integrate at various places through the DevOps cycle. So you can push left as far as you want to and basically give your developers access to AppScan at the code level. So we can tie in with the IDE at that point. And then we can also tie in at the build phase. Typically, this would be a static scan and might be one of the first official scans that's going on. You can also tie in more at the testing level with your QA team. This will probably be more of a DAST or dynamic scan in order to perform security testing of the same areas that your QA or functional team is testing, just on those areas of the site that's changed. And then also tying in at the repo layer is probably something a little bit more recent that we've been getting into. So being able to perform scans along with your Git pulls and things along that nature as well. And HCL also has a full suite of DevOps tools as well. So in addition to AppScan, we have HCL Accelerate for value stream management, Artist for modeling and dev environment, Version Vault for managing your development assets, HCL Compass for change and issue management with workflow automation, HCL Launch for deployment, and HCL AppScan, of course, for security testing, and OneTest for test automation tools. So we do go beyond security for with our product suite for DevOps. As far as the AppScan portfolio itself, we do have a full range of products there as well. So we have AppScan on premises, so you can have an installable version of AppScan there at your location. And then we also have AppScan on cloud, which we're going to be looking at today, for as a SaaS offering. So on premise, things are broken down into AppScan Standard would be like a standalone DAST scanner. AppScan Source can be used as a standalone static scanner, and then AppScan Enterprise ties in the components together, and you can have more of an enterprise suite where you can scale out and perform both dynamic and static scanning. We also have IAST monitoring available on-prem. And then in AppScan on cloud, rather than having separate components for each of these, it's the majority of the same functionality, but done as more of a subscription offering. So, DAST, SAST, IAST monitoring, all of these are available there within the subscription offering itself. And we also have the open source or SCA scanning as well as a cloud offering. And in addition to all of those, we also have our community edition for AppScan CodeSweep, which is available primarily as a IDE tool, but you can also use it in a few other scenarios. So for example, you can tie in some CodeSweep functionality with your Git repos is one use for it. And CodeSweep is it's similar to a SAST tool. I guess you could call it like a different type of SAST tool, but rather than scanning the entire site, it's more for rapid results. So if you're using it in the IDE, you can think of it kind of like a security spell check, where you can get instant alerts to insecure coding practices as you code. Getting into the different types of testing, you've heard me mention SAST and DAST scans and IAST monitoring. It's probably good to kind of talk about what each of these scans do. So for static analysis, which we're going to be looking at today, what you're doing is scanning the application code itself. where you're basically looking for untrusted data coming into an application, looking at the source code itself and passing through and being used in an unsafe way without that untrusted data being made safe. So if a user is able to enter information and then it's used to go into a database, if that's not sanitized along the way, then that's going to come up as a vulnerability from a static scan. Software composition analysis is typically paired along with static scans. So if this is something that you have enabled in your subscription, then it's also going to look for third-party libraries, like open source libraries, and determine a few things actually. So it's going to determine what version of all these libraries you're using and what their copyright scheme is. So you'll get a manifest of all these different libraries that are in use, any copyright or patent impact that it can have to your project for using this code. And it'll also find known issues in these libraries. So if you're using an insecure version of one of these libraries, then you'll get alerts to those the specific issues themselves, and along with fixed information on what version you would need to update this library to. So this is great if you're using a lot of open source and want to make sure that you have a good lay of the land of which libraries are being used, and it gives you control over spotting when developers bring these libraries in for use with your software. Then over on the right, dynamic analysis. So this is basically an automated penetration test, you could think of it, where you have a running web application and you're sending tests to it in order to see if it's exploitable. So the first stage, you basically scan through the entire application looking for all of the areas that can be scanned. And then the second stage where you're testing, you just send tests at all of those areas, and the ones that work identify that a vulnerability has been found. So this is a DAST scan is great for identifying the actual vulnerabilities that are current, present, and live in your application, so able to be exploited. And then finally, interactive analysis, or IAST. So this is a newer technology, and it's not so much a scan as it is a monitor. So you can set up an IAST monitor on a running application, and it's an agent that goes onto the server, and it takes any traffic that comes into that application, and that acts as the basis of the test. And there's a few benefits of using this. So one, the results that you get are instant, so or near instant. And then the results that you get back are kind of a combination of some of the information that you would get from a DAST or a SAST scan. So with a DAST or dynamic scan, typically your location it's going to be a URL where the issue is found. For a static scan, the location is going to be a place in the source code. But with an IAST monitor, if you find an issue, it actually provides both of those. So you'll get source code information as well as the URL where it was found. So this can help with identifying where to actually fix these issues. Another benefit of IAST monitoring is it can actually correlate existing issues that were found from both a DAST and SAST scan. So, let's say you've got some existing issues from other scans that you've done. The IAST monitor can find an issue and in some cases actually link together those existing DAST and SAST issues and say, hey, this is all the same vulnerability. This is the same issue. And so when that happens, it'll save time in fixing them because now you're fixing, essentially 3 issues at once. And it also allows for the confidence in those findings to go up. So, there's going to be less of a concern of, is this a real issue? Is this a false positive? When those issues are correlated, the confidence that it truly is a true positive and something that needs to be fixed it just goes way up to where, if you've correlated between both DAST and SAST and IAST, the confidence is very high. That's, very, very low chance that that's going to be a false positive. And so that's a summary of the scanning types that we include. And informing all of our scanning technologies, we do have, so some of our issue data is pulled from known sources, like this CWE, is a source of information for us. We also have our own research internally to inform this as well. So, some of this information that we use is out there, and some of it is internally researched, and we use those various paths to make sure that that we do have one of the leading security products on the market, and that nothing gets by us. So AppScan on Cloud is what we're going to be looking at today. And some of the benefits for using AppScan on Cloud versus on-prem, one, it was developed more recently than our our on-premise offerings, and it was developed with the mind of being simple to use. So a lot of the existing workflows have been streamlined and just given a more modern user experience. And if you've used both of the products, that is one of the first things that you notice. I get comments on this regularly from AppScan standard users, for example, that when they see AppScan on Cloud, it's a noticeable difference in just a cleaner, easier to learn process. And that translates into faster setup. Ideally, faster scans as well. Coming from the cloud scanners, you can take that workload off of your on-premise offering. And another main benefit of AppScan on Cloud is just the licensing structure is set up a little bit differently as well. So rather than licensing user licenses for your AppScan components, AppScan on Cloud is more of a subscription model that doesn't rely on users. So you can invite your whole team as well. AppScan on Cloud does have all of the scanning technologies that we mentioned before, including the open source analysis, which is a cloud-only offering. And we also have certifications for our cloud offering as well. So the big one that usually we get asked about is the ISO 27001. We're also ISO 20243 certified in the cloud as well. The management capabilities, we'll get into some of this in the lab, but AppScan on Cloud is enterprise capable. So you have a centralized login where all of your users can log in and kind of see the same view. This includes dashboards, your full list of applications as a portfolio. We'll talk about the policies that you can set up and what scans look like. AppScan Presence is a component that you can use for scanning. Let's say that you've got an application that's hosted behind your firewall. So like a locally not internet accessible application. The Presence is basically a small tool that we use to enable scanning of those types of applications easily. We've got a variety of plugins that are all available to you without additional licensing in AppScan on Cloud. We have a REST API for any integrations that we don't offer out of the box. You can develop that using the REST API. The access management is it's very it's easy to use, easy to set up, and logical. Like the list of permissions is fairly easy to understand, so you can manage access for large groups, large organizations. And then the one thing is for the for domains for AppScan on cloud. As a cloud offering, you wouldn't want other organizations being able to use AppScan to scan your applications. So there is a process for showing ownership of your domains. So that's protected as well. The workflow is fairly basic. So you first set up your different application profiles. Onboarding for this is fairly simple. Then if the site you're scanning is in a private network, you might need to set up one of those AppScan presence items. If you're performing a static scan, then there's an additional component that you might need to use for that. If it's an IAST monitoring, then setting up that monitoring agent. So, those individual components that you might need to help with the scan, just that setup. Then configuring the scan itself is a fairly short wizard to configure the scan. And then once the scan's done, then you would move on to the reporting step. So application creation, fairly basic. You basically just click on create a new application. You can see the list that we already have started here. And once you click on that, then you just give the application a name. And if you wanted to, you could stop there with just that one step, but a few other pieces on this first page can help as well. So business impact, this can help prioritize the applications once you have a few of them. This will take into account business impact, which is how important you say the application is versus the different issues that have been found. And you can see on the left here, the risk rating is medium for all of these, but this could be low, this could be high, and that's basically just a combination of the business impact versus the severity and number of issues that have been found. So business impact is used to help you with that prioritization. Business unit is a way to divide up your applications primarily for reporting purposes. So you can set up different business units and kind of report on different groups. And then asset group is similar, except instead of reporting, this is for access. So let's say you have 3 development teams and you'd like to restrict them all to their own applications. You could set up 3 asset groups, and that's going to help keep everybody separate to their respective applications. But those are the main items that you would need. There's additional information you can assign to these applications, but those are the probably the primary for getting started that you would be concerned about. The idea of policies. So associating policies allows you to kind of focus what you're worried about with an application. So for example, one of our policies is the OWASP top 10 policy. And you could assign that policy, and that's just going to restrict your view of the application. So, when you log in to take a look, you're only going to see OWASP top 10 issues. And it's very easy to, one button, and you can see everything that's in there. But it's just a way to kind of focus down what you're the most concerned about for an application. And you can use it to actually do some pretty cool things. So for example, if you were tying in your scans with a build, then you can say, let's let the build pause as the scan is performed. And, once the scan's done, if you've failed the policy, then go ahead and fail the build. So it allows you to set a hard compliance gate. You can set a hard compliance gate. And that way, if you have a strict rules around OWASP top 10 or, any of our other policies that we offer, then you can make sure that those types of issues aren't able to get past the build process. The baseline policy, so this is a special policy that we have. And so imagine that you have a large application, maybe it's been around for a while, and you're just getting started with security on it. So you perform a static scan, and that comes back with a very high number of issues. So let's say that you've got 1,000 or two issues in there, and which for a large application and a static scan, it is possible to find that scale of issues. So you can do a baseline policy, which basically says all of the issues that we've found so far, like all of our existing issues, that's our baseline. So you would set your baseline at today, November 10th. And now any issues that show up after November 10th, those would fail the policy. So like if a new issue is introduced into the application, those are going to be the issues that don't meet the policy. Any existing issues, they're still part of that baseline. And so you can set up the same functionality around, basically just new issues that are being added to the application. And then, set your strict mandates around these new issues, whatever fails this baseline policy, while at the same time, having a more relaxed approach to work on your backlog. For user privileges, it's fairly easy to work with. We've got a few default roles that you can set up. So, standard like administrator, manager, somebody who can only view reports, things like that. And you can also do custom roles as well. So if you actually go into the application, like you'll see the various privileges that come under each of these roles. And so you can actually go in and select and deselect and create custom roles that are very specific around what that user can or can't do. Typically when you're getting started, one of these defaults is okay, but that level of granularity is available and very easy to understand and set up. So you can have very precise roles for exactly how your organization works. We mentioned asset groups. Probably how I've already described is the best way to think about asset groups. It's just a way to divide up, if you've got 3 different dev teams and you don't want them to see each other's applications, then you can just set up asset groups and help keep them separate. So the labs that we're going to be working on today are for static analyzer, as well as the open source or the SCA component. And we offer fairly broad language support in AppScan on cloud. I feel like maybe a few years ago, sometimes we would be asked about languages and we might not support it yet, but I actually can't think of the last time that I had someone request a language that we don't offer, unless it was like severely niche and they weren't expecting it to be covered anyways. But yeah, our language support is broad. It's available on our, if you Google AppScan on cloud, you can find in our documentation, it's listed out. But yeah, very broad language and library support. Most likely, unless you're using something, fairly niche, we are going to have support for your language of choice. This kind of goes over just the the data flow analysis, that the idea of checking for taint within the source code. It's that idea of just following untrusted data through the application and checking for whether or not it's used in a dangerous way and validated or not. We do have some capabilities around custom scanners. We call it bring your own language. And this is something that you can actually work with our team for creating custom scanners that perform vulnerability analysis directly on the source code. They can be dropped into any AppScan deployment, and it's generally built for language specific requirements. So, if you were working with a niche language and you wanted to help develop one of these custom scanners for your use case, that's something that you can contact us about as well. The idea of scanning source code directly, so um, this is probably less of an issue now as it's been in the past. But before cloud had really caught on the way that it is today, some organizations had concerned about sending source code up to the cloud. So one of the ways that we addressed this, and also just as part of our architecture, is not sending up the actual source code, but sending up an intermediate representation of the source code. So this is basically our own proprietary format. And when you perform a static scan, what you're doing is generating this IR file, this IRX file. This is generated at your location, and then that IRX file is what's actually sent up to the cloud. So, one, there's some security layers there of it being encrypted at rest and in transit. And then also for some of our languages, if we're doing a full data flow analysis, then we actually discard parts of the source code before creating this IR format. And so even if somebody were able to get a hold of this artifact and decode it and have access to its contents, for those languages like Java and .NET, they wouldn't be able to reverse engineer it into running code. So it's an additional layer of protection against your intellectual property. Some languages like JavaScript are sent up in the source code is intact in this IRX file, but even in those cases, it's still going to be fully encrypted and protected that way. So the SAST architecture, yeah, there's a few different ways that that you can basically generate this IRX. One, you can do it through an IDE plugin, which actually our IDE plugins are moving more towards the CodeSweep model, so they wouldn't be sending up these IRX anymore. But traditionally, you could actually just generate one through the IDE and perform a scan that way. And then you can also do it through a component called AppScan Go, which is the one we're going to be working with today. And so it's just a small component that you can use on your desktop, point it at the source code and generate the IRX that way. Yeah, and this is just some of the reasons behind, why we went to the using an IRX file. So, uploading source code to the cloud. Honestly, this is a little bit more accepted now than it was a few years ago. So I haven't really heard too many organizations with concerns about this now that it's more of a mainstream thing to do. Yeah, and this just talks about being encrypted at rest and during transfer. So let's see, the AppScan on cloud scanning architecture. So AppScan Go, this is the tool that we're going to be working with to perform a scan of source code today. It can use, there's a config file that you can use. Basically, AppScan Go will generate this config file, and then you can also use this config file in other perspectives as well. So, you can run one config scan And then you use that also with some of our other integrations. So like if you were going to use this with one of your build tools, then you can use that same config file and it'll perform the same scan the other way. So, you can either use AppScan Go as a, as to perform the scan itself and push straight up to AppScan on cloud, or you can tie in with your build tools and do it in an automated way. So our open source analyzer, let's see. So the basic idea behind our open source analyzer is that it's going to happen at the same time as a static scan. So if you're licensed for open source, basically you're taking care of two scans at the same time. You can just perform both the static scan as well as the open source scan. And it's the open source piece is very fast, and then you'll get the findings all together as well. This is just kind of a list of some of the different file types that are supported for the open source scanner. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about what's new in AppScan on Cloud also. So this is talking about parallel scanning. So this is just additional concurrency and some of the speed improvements that we've been able to add to that. And I would say that optimization is probably one of the places where we've put a lot of work into over the past few years. Being able to speed up both DAST and static scans is, it's one of the things that you'll see with a lot of our newer releases. Infrastructure as code. So being able to scan your config files, like Docker files, Docker Compose YAML files, basically the configurations that go behind Docker and Kubernetes. So these are able to be scanned for security issues as well. And this just talks a little bit more about the actual config files that are being used for these. SAP ABAP is also one of the, this is something that's been added, and this is actually a pretty big one for anyone who's using SAP, just because the setup of ABAP is a little bit different from more traditional programming languages. So this is support that we've added in recent years as well. We do have some machine learning functionality as well. Intelligent code analytics is one of the options. So this is basically eliminating false negatives. This is additional coverage for frameworks being used by an application during a scan. So probably the easiest way to think about this is, let's say that you have a language that we support, but you're using a niche framework that we might not have all of the information about this framework. Intelligent code analytics allows us to expand coverage on this unknown framework. So it's basically using machine learning to understand how that framework works and not have to drop coverage for places that we don't necessarily understand the framework. So that expands coverage on those types of frameworks. Then intelligent findings analytics. So this helps reduce false positives. It's basically the same step that a security analyst would traditionally have to do. So like you perform a static scan, you get back a ton of results, and then typically a security analyst would have to go through and determine which of these findings directly relate to vulnerabilities, which ones are a little bit more informational or theoretical in nature. And for a large application with a lot of vulnerabilities, that can be very time consuming. So intelligent findings analytics is kind of like a first pass at that stage in order to kind of sort out the uninteresting findings that aren't likely to tie in with an actual security issue and can reduce the workload for the the security person who actually needs to go through and look at these. And then fixed groups are another piece where we use machine learning as well. And fixed groups basically, the easiest way to think about it is, let's say that you've got 20 different SQL injection vulnerabilities and they're spread out all over your application. But within the code, they all pass through the same database method. And that would be the place that you would fix all of these. So fixed groups are just able to identify that these vulnerabilities are related and they do have that same fix point. And that way, when you go into work on your vulnerabilities, you can take a look at the fix group and fix a large chunk of them at once. This is a chart for the intelligent findings analytics. These are just some real world applications from our testing, and just show the the scope of how well this can work in order to reduce false positives and kind of pare down those findings to real vulnerabilities. You can see that the most dramatic was this application 3, which had about a 250,000 findings that were found, but we were able to pare those down to just a little over 1,000 vulnerabilities. And the fix recommendations, so like the actual fix groups, only ended up being about 103 fix groups. So that represents a significant amount of work that the security expert would not have to do to pare down those same steps. And then yeah, these are some results just around the intelligent code analytics. Having being able to correctly classify coverage on unknown frameworks. And the number to look at here is basically the high accuracy of identifying these various being able to see taint propagators, source, and sink for vulnerabilities. So we did talk a little bit about CodeSweep. I think the idea behind CodeSweep, just to help you understand, is originally we had in our IDEs the ability for developers to run full scans, and so the developer would initialize a scan, it would go off to the cloud, or it would go off to to AppScan Source, and then you would wait for that scan to complete, and that could be for a large application, it could be a couple of hours to wait for a scan. And we found that developers didn't really like waiting, and so this was something that wasn't necessarily used a lot, and also had licensing concerns, just being able to give your whole dev team, okay, run a scan whenever you want to. This can have it can impact your availability of your scan servers. It can impact the number of scans that are getting done. So we've moved to CodeSweep in the IDE, and it solves a lot of these problems. One, the results are very, very fast. So, the developer does some work, hits save, and it's only the areas that they've worked on that are going to get checked. And it's a very fast pattern-based check, and they get instant feedback on that. And it's also not tied to your license. So, it's not something where you have to worry about, like if you're on a per scan license, for example, having your developers use up all of your scans and then you're out, you need to go buy some more. So it turns out to be a much better solution for developers, and as a community offering, it's actually something that you can use today